And as I said, we're doing this two-part series on the movie It's a Wonderful Life starring you. We started last week by the conversation was the wonderful aspect of life, and we talked about unconditional wonder at living and how to embrace that. Talked a lot about the George Bailey story and the movie It's a Wonderful Life. Many of you told me that you've gone out to rewatch or watched for the first time the movie in this past week, so that's good to know. And today we're talking about another part of the movie that I think is a key component, not only to the story of George Bailey, but to us as people living this life. And today's message is called God, Show Me the Way. God, show me the way. And it's born out of a moment in the movie. I think they have a picture of it coming up. George Bailey, his uncle, has misplaced $8,000. And George is taking full responsibility for this loss. But in the process, it's really stressed him out because he knows there's going to be consequences for this and that he will probably face those consequences. Could be jail, being removed from his family, and he goes home and he's very grumpy. He's so grumpy that he uncharacteristically is very harsh with his wife. He's harsh with his children. He even says to his wife, "Why do we have all these children? Why do we have them?" And is kind of upset about what's going on in the house and grumpy at every child. He has one child, Zuzu, who came home and her teacher didn't put her coat on her. And so the little girl is not feeling well. So the teacher calls to see how the little girl is. And George grabs the phone and bawls her out. And he gives her a hard time for not helping his daughter put her coat on. And what's wrong with you teachers? And blah, 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 blah. And he's really upset. And his wife finally tells him to leave. And so he leaves and he goes to a bar to have a drink. His friend Martinelli owns this bar, and he sits down to have a drink. And in that moment, he has this desperate moment as he's drinking this drink, and he doesn't know what to do. And he basically says, "I'm not much of a praying man, God, but please show me the way. Show me the way." And Mr. Martinelli gets up and says to him, "Mr. Bailey, go home. You've had too much to drink." And this man sitting next to George says, "Is that a Bailey?" And Mr. Martinelli says, "Yes, this is Mr. George Bailey." And the man punches George and knocks him to the ground. And it turns out that's the husband of the teacher that he had bawled out. Oops. But George says, I got an answer to my prayer. I prayed and I got punched in the face. An answer to prayer. Has that ever happened to you? Maybe you didn't get punched in the face, but maybe what you thought was going to happen didn't quite happen. And it's a key moment when George interprets this to the answer to his prayer. I know that feeling when I've prayed for something fervently and it's not happening and things aren't happening or something the opposite happens or something worse happens and I can't believe it and I wonder. And this takes me into a whole wanting of exploration of that prayerful stance. You may have noticed if you've been around here for a while that we pray a little differently. Or even if you're brand new today, you might have noticed that Reverend Jackie's prayer a little different than the traditional way people tend to pray. Most prayers in a lot of traditions are that kind of talking to something out there. Please, God, show me the way. And our teaching has at its core, when it comes to God and to prayer, a belief that whatever God is, it's not just out there, some guy in the sky listening to prayers and answering some and not answering others and giving goodies to others and punishing others. We've tended to move away from that concept of the notion of God and believe that God is more like some of the Eastern traditions, the Tao teaches or Buddhism teaches, the notion that God, whatever it is not a person, but rather a presence that is expressing itself in, through, and as all of creation and all of life. And therefore, when we use prayer, in our world, in our teaching, the most effective way to pray is a prayer of alignment, a prayer where we know that every moment of our life, this life is co-creating through us, and that our thoughts and our ideas and our attitudes and our energy become the container through which this energy creates itself. So therefore, we don't see prayer as a, hey, will you please do this goodie for me? Just do this for me and I'll do that for you. Or do this for me and I promise I'll never do that again. We don't see it necessarily that way. It's more affirmative. It's more aligning. And I also personally believe there's never a wrong way to pray. Even though I believe fervently and passionately in this affirmative kind of prayer, I believe that every faith tradition, as long as a prayer is uttered that is seeking to do more good or seeking to right something that we don't feel good about or seeking to align us with healing or wholeness or greater good, it can't be wrong. It can't be bad. And that all prayer from all faith traditions is good because prayer in and of itself is an attempt on the part of the prayer to connect with the God of one's understanding and to feel that connection in partnership to forward the momentum of their life in a certain way. And so while we may never necessarily go, God, please do this, I certainly have had my moments, even in my aligned prayers, where my prayer in that moment has been, show me the way. Show me the way. As a knowing that I needed and was calling forth guidance for myself. When I didn't know what to do, when I couldn't see the path clearly, when I was feeling a critical moment in my life, a need of healing. And even at times when I've been presented with some opportunity to change my life for good, and I'm not sure what direction to go. Show me the way. What is the way that is unfolding for us right here and right now? And so it's really about that coming into alignment and choosing to say, I accept guidance. Ernest Holmes, the founder of our teaching, says very clearly, it is not the form of the treatment which you give or the prayer which you make that gives it power. Rather, it is your faith. And that is the key. So George Bailey is desperate in that moment. And yet he has a lot of faith. And then what happens is fascinating because the whole story is about how God sends him a guardian angel, Clarence Oddbody, to help him out. But what does George do? After he's begged to be shown the way is presented, he rejects it. Yeah, there's no such thing as guardian angels. Who is this little man who's sitting next to me? What is he trying to show me? And I reflect on this too, and invite us all to take a look at those times we've desperately asked for prayer, for a solution. And then a door opens, and we go, oh, well, not that door. God, show me the way. And then an opportunity, well, not that. No, I could never do that. I'm not good enough for that. That's not the right way, I'm sure. It reminds me of that wonderful teaching story about a man whose town is flooding. And so he climbs in his church to like the third story, and the water is coming up higher and higher, and a boat comes along, and they say to the man, get in the boat, get in the boat. And he says, no, God will save me. And the boat goes on, and the water's getting higher and higher, and the man climbs, and he's hanging off the steeple of the church, and a helicopter comes, and they say, get in the helicopter, get in the helicopter. And the man says, no, God will save me. And the water rises, and the man drowns. And then he's in heaven, and he's in the presence of the divine, and he says, God, why didn't you save me? And God said, I sent a boat and a helicopter. Sometimes we're like that, aren't we? Yep. We want to be shown the way just as long as it's the right conditions and the way I want it to be shown to me, and it doesn't cause any risk, and I don't have to get out of my comfort zone, and it doesn't involve some weird little angel showing me stuff. Right? Conditional prayers. And what we're talking about today is the courage Not only to pray, I think prayer is a cornerstone of the life of a spiritual being, that we learn how to pray and we speak our prayers and we do our prayers and we get prayer support from practitioners and prayer partners, and we make prayer a cornerstone of our life. But a huge part of allowing prayer to work for us is then to move forward after we've prayed, to watch what happens. This reminds me of last week I talked a little bit about in 2008 when I was in Arizona ministering to the New Vision Center there, and the housing market had a huge crisis. And the giving in our church dropped dramatically because people were really scared about the economy. And I had my George Bailey moment I told you last week, where I realized the church had an insurance policy, and just like George, I realized I might be actually worth more dead than alive. And then my guidance, thank goodness, said, no, that is not the path. And so I watched this movie. And when I watched the movie, I got inspired. And I realized in that moment where George prays, and then he gets guidance, that the key that I needed to do right then and there in that moment of crisis was to pray like never before. And the way I kept seeing it is that I knew that I would do my prayer work, and then I would partner with the leaders in my church, and that as doors opened, we would walk through them and we would see what happened. And a door opened almost immediately as a member of the church came and said, I found a church that's for sale. And it was like, ooh. And then we went to the banks, and the bank said, we are not lending to churches unless you would like to pay 50% interest, or whatever it was at the time. It was crazy. It seemed impossible. And we were a little bit nervous about that, but we kept praying. And then the landlord said, well, I'm not letting you out of your lease. That's not going to happen. And so we kept praying and listening to our guidance. We did individually and collectively. Sometimes people gave me advice, quite frankly, board members or other business people, and my guidance was, nope, that's not what we're supposed to do. And somehow we followed our guidance. We found a lender. I will take full responsibility. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but I can be a little charming occasionally. And I charmed the landlord out of surrendering the lease. And then the congregation approved it. We moved forward, and it took us a long time, almost a year. Throughout that year, people kept giving and kept us going financially. And before we knew it, we were closing on the building. We were, right as we got up to the closing, we were short the money we needed. And we prayed for guidance. And out of the blue, an angel investor showed up who wanted to remain anonymous, who brought all the money to the table that we needed for the closing, for all the closing costs. We purchased that building. The church that had owned it previously was downsizing, and they said, we're going to leave you some stuff. And we said, okay. Oh, they left so much stuff. And we moved in during the Christmas season, and our goal was to have our first service be Christmas Eve candlelight services. But we had a mess on our hands. We had so much to clean up, and lights to install, and a sound system to get going. And we had people there 24/7 for days. And I'll never forget that feeling on Christmas Eve as we stood there for that candlelight service. And I knew that we as a community had walked our talk. We had listened to guidance. And I tell my students all the time, TSW, this stuff works. And I knew that night it was a Christmas miracle. I call miracles normicals because they are normal, right? They are the normal reality of our life. But it was amazing. And what I know we did is we prayed and we walked through the doors. And we prayed and we walked through the doors. And I'm calling all of us today in our life, whatever state our life is in now, to do the same thing, to pay attention, to do the prayer work, and then keep your eyes open. Because just like that angel investor showed up at the last minute, there's, I think, angelic presences and opportunities all around us. Now, I am on the fence, let's talk about angels, about if there are Clarence odd bodies assigned to each one of us or not. I remember having a radio show in Arizona, and I interviewed a woman who was all about angels. And I left the interview, quite frankly, a little skeptical. Are there angels or not? And I was meditating for guidance about angels. And here's what I got. If you don't believe in angels, they can't help you. It was kind of like what my mom's been telling me about Santa all my life. Keep believing, and Santa shows up. And she's right. She's absolutely right. And so I've been experimenting with that notion. And in fact, one of the most popular lines, if not the most popular line from the show, is all about Clarence Oddbody. Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, right? We see it everywhere. Angels are part of the history of humanity. If we look into the Judeo-Christian Bible, we see lots of references to angels and angelic forms in many sacred texts. And so angels may be an important part of life. Here's what our founder, Ernest Holmes, says about it. He says, there is a divine self. The Hindus called this Atman. It has been called Buddha. The Gita called it Krishna, and the Bible calls it Christ. Socrates called it his spirit or his daemon, which he said accompanied him through life. It is through an intuitive perception of this incarnated presence that the idea of a guardian angel arose. And so I think I've come to believe there are many forms that angels might take in our life. So my first task to us is have a prayerful life. When you pray, open your eyes, pay attention, because opportunities might show up and angels might show up. Angels show up in the form of people who can support us in our efforts. But in order for those angels to do their work, we've got to be receptive, don't we? So the second step here is being receptive to angels, not saying, oh, I don't need any help. Show me the way, and someone comes up to help you to do that or get the way done, and you say, I don't need any help. The hand goes up, right? Many of us, when it comes to the universe, we're like this. In order to be guided, we have to be open. Like this. If I pray the prayer, show me the way, and I pray it faithfully, the way may show up in someone says, can I help you with that? The way may show up in mysterious ways. I know plenty of people who've said, I was in a crisis. Someone showed up and helped me. I don't know where they came from. I don't know where they went. I never saw them again. I'm sure many of us in this room have that story. Many of you watching online have that story. Angels show up in the presence of open-minded hearts that say, I'm here with you, I love you, I care about you, I know you can do it. And cheerleaders who say, I don't know what the solution is, but I know the solution is unfolding. They show up in prayer partners and practitioners. They show up in people who can support us in so many profound ways. They show up as philanthropists and friends and spiritual teachers and mentors. They also, by the way, can show up as tormentors. As I look back on my life, some of my most powerful angels were the angels who rejected me, or who changed or walked out of my life or passed on suddenly and caused me to have to go a different direction. And I look back onto a meme I saw recently. It said, it's not always rejection, it's redirection. That's part of what angels do too. Is through their absence or through their stepping away, sometimes we then are redirected in certain profound ways. And in the last few years, having lost so many people who've crossed over into the next plane, I can feel their presence still in my life, and I can hear their voice sometimes guiding me. My own father, my stepfather, my sister. She's kind of bossy sometimes, but she was that way in life too. But I can feel and sense the presence of those beings too. I found a humorous story out of the Reader's Digest. Two Irishmen walking down the street come together. Sean and Kevin haven't seen each other for many, many years. And Sean says to Kevin, "So, did you marry?" And Kevin says, "Yes, my wife is an angel." And Sean says, "Well, you're lucky, man. Mine's still here with me." If the definition of angel is a presence that guides, supports, or helps out when needed, we are surrounded by angels, I think, in every realm, in this realm and the realm that is beyond. And accepting that and being open to that is a huge part of what supports us. It supported George Bailey in his journey, and it supports us. And even the angelic voice within us, possibly. Ernest Holmes also says there is a guardian angel that accompanies everyone through life. It is the angel of God's presence in that person. It is his spiritual nature. And so I think the next step for us is to stay awakened to our own guidance. Stay awakened to our own guidance. That's important for us to be clear and calm and in the flow, and to allow our guidance to deepen every time we listen. My friend Reverend Karen Russo used to use a word I never liked, but I found it's very true. She used to say, we have to be obedient to our inner guidance. And I admit I'm not the most obedient person on the planet, but I have learned to be obedient to that inner voice. In the smallest of ways and in the biggest of ways. And the more obedient I am, the bigger that voice grows. And it grew recently very tremendously. I was in Egypt, and I came back just about a month, not quite a month ago now. And many of you have said, tell us stories about Egypt. What was it like? And I won't tell you everything today because we don't have time and I got to go do a workshop. Did I mention that? And I do have one story today, though, that started the whole thing out. I have a picture of one of my first days in Egypt. We got up very early and we went to the Sphinx, which is right on the same grounds as the pyramids of Giza. And we got to go down in between the paws of the Sphinx and sit down in that area and meditate inside of it. These are ancient sites that have been there for thousands and thousands of years, that people have gone to and prayed over and have an ancient energy about them. And all I can tell you is that most of what happened to me in Egypt was it felt like a buzzing in my body at different places, but that particular day, I felt something awaken in me that I think has always been there. I would say maybe it deepened and that the past few years of grief have softened it a bit, but it opened widely for me. And my voice of guidance was like this true north. And it was on board. And it was absolutely distinguishable, absolutely clear, and it was beautiful and brilliant, and the return of it caused me to feel that connection that I've felt here and there over the years, but now it was like solid and constant, and it was with me for the rest of the trip. And it was with me, as I say, in big ways. There were times when we went someplace and my guidance was, don't drink that drink or eat that food, and I didn't, and others did and maybe didn't fare so well from it. But I knew my body wasn't supposed to have that, wasn't supposed to do that. To everything from everyone's going shopping and my voice is saying, no, you're staying home and meditating for 10 hours. Okay. I listened. I obeyed, I was obedient, and it has made all the difference. And now that I'm here back in my daily life and the work that I do, so much guidance, so much guidance in every realm of my living. And what I know is as we're heading into our lives every single day of the year, or we're heading into the holiday season, we're sometimes hungry for guidance. I urge us to stay awake to our own inner guidance. It might be that we are saying, show me the way to be with my family this holiday season. Show me the way to be connected to life, though I'm sad because I've lost a loved one or my life has changed dramatically. Show me the way because I'm up for healing in my heart or in my body or in my relationship with so-and-so. Show me the way. And what I know is that just like George Bailey, just like so many of us along the journey, when we are open to being shown the way is made for us. The way is made clear. The path is lit. And our job, just like it was for me in that community back in Arizona, is to continue to walk through the doors, knowing that we are always shown the highest and best for ourselves if we pay close attention. Pay close attention. So, this week, these coming days, our work is to continue to live a prayerful life. Our work is to open ourselves up to be prayerful, to watch the guidance, and to listen to our angels along the way that say, oh, my beloved, walk through this door. Walk through this door and be healed and be renewed and rejuvenated. That is our work. Those of us who are up for it are up for a beautiful ride of connection and wholeness. Let's take that together now as we pray together. I invite our practitioner prayer partners to stand with us in prayer. And we feel they're standing with us as a connecting rod of energy that goes through this room and through the community for the online viewers as our practitioners are standing, maybe even in their homes if they're watching from home. We take a stand today for the power of prayer and guidance. We take a stand today knowing that the infinite life that lives itself through us is always on board. It never is asleep. It's never non-responsive. It is always here, always now, always present, always bringing great ideas, big possibilities, comfort, and joy. We choose today, each one of us knowing that this power and this presence is activated through us. We choose to be open to it, to be available to our own inner voice, that guidance within and the guidance that lives in the realm of what appears to be other. For we know that it is all one. That the voices, the hearts, the love, the support, the upliftment of the beloveds we share our life with is a part of that angelic realm of the divine, as well as our own inner awareness. And so we stay awake to it all. And as we say those words about any part of our life, God, show me the way. The way is made. I am shown the way. I accept the way, and I walk that way in love and light. I know this and accept this on behalf of each one of us this day, and I'm grateful that this is the truth of us here, now, and always. And in this gratitude, I simply release this prayer into the action of that law that does its work. I let it be. I let it go. It is done. And so it is. Amen.